Now, I go to thrift stores pretty often, and lately I've mostly been walking away empty-handed. It's kind of been a dry spell, which if you frequent thrift stores, you probably understand what I mean. Sometimes you can just go months without finding anything interesting. However, the other day, I went in and found this. Yes, that's right, I found a GTX 760. This one is made by EVGA, it's even overclocked. Has 2 gigabytes of VRAM, it even has a nice backplate on it, and it even still has the little SLI protector on it. So yeah, seeing a sight like just a graphics card at a thrift store, not in a computer, just the graphics card at a thrift store is pretty uncommon. You know, most of the kind of like electronic stuff you'd expect to see is like a whole computer or like DVD players or something. Now they wanted $60 for this card, which for its performance is okay, I guess. That's about what it goes for on eBay. I mean, in this market, I mean, you basically have to take anything you can get these days, since it's been like a year and a half, and graphics cards are still almost unobtainable. So to walk across one just that someone just donated to a thrift store, I mean, it's basically like throwing it away. I mean, they could have sold it, but they gave it away. Now, they wanted $60 for this card. However, it was raffle day. Now, I love raffle day at my thrift store. It's my second favorite day after half-off day. See, on raffle day, you get to pull a piece of paper from a bowl, and whatever's written on it, that's the discount you get. Unfortunately, I didn't get one of the magical high ones, like 50%, or supposedly there's a free one in there somewhere, as I've been told. But I got 30% off. I mean, that's still a pretty good deal. So with tax and everything, this card came out to just a little over $47. So I'll just round up and say $48. Now, $48 for a 760, that's even better. Because this card can still play some games, you know, if you temper your expectations and don't run your settings too high. I was a little bit leery about buying it because, well, there was no box. There was no anti-static bag. It was literally just sitting on a shelf buried in between all the other monitors and stuff. So, I mean, I looked at it and I was like, well, it looks okay. It's really dirty. Obviously, somebody never cleaned it. But, I mean, maybe it still works. It has a backplate on it, which is probably the only reason why it survived, because with a backplate, it's really hard to damage the board. But it even still has the protective plastic on all the logos. So I decided to just go ahead and throw it in my main computer, since I didn't have any other computers really ready at the moment. Powered it up, and it actually worked. So thankfully, I didn't waste $48, and got a pretty good deal then. But before we really benchmark the card at all and see just how good of a deal I got, we need to clean this thing, because it's pretty dirty. Not as dirty as some cards, but it still definitely needs some cleaning.
So cleaning the card was rather straightforward, nothing really to note, although it oddly had this weird sweet smell to it that I noticed whilst cleaning. I'm not really sure how to describe it, it was just a sweet smell. But I did all the usual things, blow all the dust out and wipe everything down, and of course, replace the thermal paste. I didn't replace the thermal pads because they still looked like they were in good condition, just a little dusty around the edges. I decided to do all the testing on my main computer since I don't really have another system set up and ready at the moment. It has a Ryzen 5 5600X, 16GB of 3600MHz RAM, and all on an Asus X570 Prime motherboard. Now, I don't really have that many modern games to test on here, and I didn't do very in-depth benchmarking, so this isn't going to be the most technical analysis of the 760. Nevertheless, how does this card still hold up today, and was it worth the $48 I spent on it? Starting with the CSGO community benchmark, ran at 1080p low settings with high shadows, which from what I know is the settings that professional players usually use. I could be very wrong on that, so please correct me if I am. The 760 scored an average FPS of 259.76. That might seem quite high, however the frame rate dropped considerably in dense smoke, and it also stuttered a bit more than one would really like, Anyways, I'd still say CSGO is playable for the most part, which isn't very surprising since it's from 2012. Doom 2016 at 1080p low settings using the Vulkan renderer, the card performed worse than I really expected it to. I've always been under the impression that Doom can run pretty well on a lot of lower end cards, but I guess that's not the case here. That's not to say the performance is terrible, usually hovering between 40 to 70 FPS, but for a fast-paced game like this, you'd really have to turn down the resolution. And yes, I did try the OpenGL renderer, however, I didn't notice a noticeable difference in the FPS. Even though it's a Source Engine game, Black Mesa can still be somewhat demanding, especially when you crank it up. Thankfully at 1080p medium, Black Mesa runs and looks great, never really dipping below 60 FPS, even in some of the more demanding levels like surface tension. I figured Warzone would be a good stress test for the card since it's the most demanding free-to-play game I could think of. Unfortunately, this is where the 760 is really showing its age. With all of the settings as low as they could go and the render resolution set as low as I could get it, I could not get the game to fit into the 2GB of VRAM on the card, or at least according to the bar in the settings menu. Performance is a mess, running between 30 to 40 FPS with stutters and inconsistent frame times. The game is not very enjoyable, not to mention how bad the game looks at such low settings. It's not completely unplayable, but certainly far from ideal. Playing Minecraft with the Seuss shaders was surprisingly decent, never really dipping below 30 FPS. While that's at lower settings than what I usually run on my 1060, it's rather pleasant to look at. Importantly, there wasn't that much stuttering, and since most of the time Minecraft isn't a very high action game, the 30 to 40 FPS average was completely playable, at least by my standards. And of course, this card is still perfectly fine for much simpler games and indie games. So if that's what you're looking to play and you get a good deal on one of these, you should be quite content with your purchase. And of course, for the obligatory synthetic benchmark, here are the Firestrike scores.
So was it worth the $48 that I spent on it? I think I would say yes. Just going off of eBay prices alone, $48 is pretty reasonable for one of these. As we saw, you can still play some modern-ish games on it. Just temper your expectations. One nice thing about this card, and something that we might experiment with in the future, is that it actually has Windows XP drivers. Of course, this is extremely overkill for XP. Any XP game you throw at this it's just going to blow right through it. But still, $48 for a really high-end XP card, that's really not that bad. Especially when you compare it to some of the mid-2000s cards that kind of go for the $30 to $40 mark. In comparison to those, this is actually a really good deal, because, of course, it's way more powerful than anything from the mid-2000s. Now, should you buy a graphics card from a thrift store, though? That one's definitely a little bit more iffy. If it has like the box and it's in an anti-static bag and it looks really nice, you're probably okay. You probably don't have to worry too much. But if you're like me and you just found one that's dirty, it's not even in a bag, it's just sitting on a shelf, neglected, I would definitely be iffy about it. You know, like I said, I think one of the only reasons why this card has survived is because it has a backplate which protected all of the surface mount components on the back of the board. So definitely do a good visual inspection before you buy. Of course, I'm not expecting that many of you to actually, come across a graphics card at a thrift store anytime soon, but hey, you never know what can happen. It's not the first time I found a graphics card at a thrift store, but that's a story for another time. Overall, I think it was worth spending the $48 on this thing. Of course, I don't really have much of a use for it now, because I have more powerful cards for playing modern games, and I already have a dedicated XP machine that has two 8800 GTXs in it. But it's nice to have as a standby card for testing or whatever, and I don't know, maybe I'll give it to somebody someday. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video and taking a look at definitely one of my more interesting thrift store finds. And here's to you all, hoping that you have as good as luck as I do at thrift stores. Have a good day, guys.